These 2 episodes of Attack on Titan start to cast a tiny bit of illumination on the mysteries of the show. A new mission objective is identified and our heroes appear to have a new ally. I can't wait to discuss it, so let's get to it. So it looks like we're still struggling for Trost with parts 5 and 6 in the arc. And when I first got into this arc, I didn't realize how long this section of Season 1 was going to be, but it is not disappointing me in the least. It's never getting boring, and they keep introducing new twists, so they can take as long as they need to struggle for Trost, but maybe they're getting close to being done, with the Trost part, of course. And the episodes continue to have a recap beforehand, but a lot of folks in the comments have let me know that this was released weekly, so a lot of folks may need that recap, and I am familiar with the previously on segment and shows that I've watched, and also sometimes it was to help with the budget and to make sure they filled the time that was allotted to them, and they could extend or contract those recaps to help that out, so that was a good bit of information to have. I have to start off with a confession, because I did get a little confused with both the time and the location of what was happening at the beginning of episode 9. I wasn't sure exactly where or when that part was happening, because we get an introduction to some characters that are either new or I don't remember from when they showed up before, but we get an introduction to Captain Levi and his crew. And this Captain Levi seems like a real heroic type guy, and his crew seem like they're a legit A-level, A-team crew that they've got here. There's also this young woman who's wearing rectangle or square-shaped glasses. It seems to be very enthusiastic about her scout regiment responsibilities. And I am assuming this is a scout regiment by the cloaks and the feather design on the back. And part of what we learn here with this introduction to this new crew, and we do get to see this crew in action, we find out that the scouts are getting better. I mean, they say that the scouts are getting better, but despite that improvement, there's still like a 30% mortality rate on these scouting missions. And that's a really high mortality rate, in my opinion. Like, if me and 2 other people go to the store, I don't expect one of them to get killed, but I also don't expect to see Titans on the way to the store either. But it still makes me wonder, like, is this mortality rate something that's a population control measure? Like, do they really count on 30% of the scouts dying? Is that why they send them out there in the first place? Those are just all my cynical questions that are always bouncing around. And I do love echoes and reflections whenever I'm watching a show or reading a book or a movie. And I think that this squad has a few of those echoes or reflections. Like Captain Levi. The first thing I want to know is Captain Levi kind of an echo of Eren, or showing of what might have been for Eren? They do seem to have like this similar hatred for Titans. They both seem very much of a one-track mind that they want to kill and eliminate Titans. So I don't know if it's an echo or more like an example of what Eren could have been if not for the things we're going to discover along the way in these 2 episodes. You know, if not for Eren getting chomped back a couple of episodes ago and the changes that followed that. And then the glasses lady. I guess if Levi is supposed to be an echo of Eren, it would make sense. Is the lady with the rectangle glasses, is she an echo of Mikasa? Honestly, I don't think so. Like, the closest I see with that enthusiasm and her sort of off-the-wall attitude is I see her being more similar to what we've seen so far of Sasha, Potato Girl. And then the real honest-to-goodness echo in this introduction to this scout regiment, this group that kind of opens up episode 9 with their adventure, is this scout that's dying. And when you see that dying scout in this scenario, you can't help but compare it to episode 1 when they're bringing back the remains of the dead scout to his mother, and it's all wrapped up and all they have to give her is the arm. And in that scenario, everybody kind of has a whole lot of despair because this person died for nothing, essentially. His death, his life, his contribution amounted to nothing. Well, here in Captain Levi's squad, when we see the scout dying, Captain Levi goes out of his way to make sure and make it clear that this scout died for something, that this scout meant something, that this scout contributed something to humanity. So once again, we get like similar situation with divergent outcomes. And also we see a whole different level of soldier with Levi's crew. There's not really many words other than darned impressive to describe how they're going out there and doing their business and taking on the Titans. You can tell that they have a lot more experience than the cadets had when they were battling Titans. And I wasn't sure, once again, exactly when this was happening in relation to the events of episode 7 and 8, but the timeline did start to sink in a little better, and I realized then that Levi's crew, well, they were out scouting when the attack happened. So this is happening more or less simultaneously to episode 7. So then a few light bulbs started to go off, and a few gears started to grind in my mind, and things clicked into position. I started wondering, were they out on their scouting mission while this attack was happening, like clearly a higher grade of soldier than what we saw available to battle the Titans when they attacked? Was it just a coincidence that they happened to be away from the city when the attack happened? Or is there some kind of sinister behind-the-scenes manipulation that was making sure that either the attack happened while they were out, or that they were out when the attack was planned to happen? You know, I don't know who moved which piece into what position, but I'm starting to wonder about some kind of nefarious conspiracy and traitors and people in whom the citizens of this community should be able to trust that are actually working counter to their own best interests in a way. So who has this level of understanding? Like, who can either predict Titan attacks or trigger Titan attacks and also might have the power to make assignments to the scout mission? I don't know that answer yet. Maybe that's something we'll discover more of as the show goes on. And then also, what exactly would their motivation be? Now that's the real question mark, is if there is a conspiracy, if there are sinister forces at play here, if there are traitors amongst the humans, why? Like, what do they have to gain? And I can't answer that question, so that makes it kind of hard for me to double down on the conspiracy idea, but I do have such a suspicious and cynical mind, I just can't help it. Now, when we see Captain Levi fighting against the Titans, something that really caught my attention is that he's not just killing Titans, he's punishing Titans. Because we see him gouge out the eyes on one Titan. He makes a threat along the lines of he's going to peel off its flesh before he kills it. Of course, he does kill it. But now I want to know, what is Levi's backstory? And I kind of have enough confidence in the show that we're probably going to get a glimpse of that at some point. But also, this show's clearly playing a long game, so it might be a while before I get that backstory. But I want to know what his motivation is. Like, I definitely understand after the whole PostChomp incident why Aaron hates the Titans so much. But what was Levi's? What was Captain Levi's PostChomp? Like, I'm super curious. I have no idea or speculation about that. But boy, I can't wait to see what his story is. Then we go get caught up with Aaron. And this is PostChomp pre-Titan resurrection, or whatever we want to call his return as a good Titan. But we see Aaron floating around in the red fluid. We see what was happening in episode 7 before he made his triumphant appearance on the scene as the pointy-eared Titan. And when he's floating around in that red fluid, I assume it's like in the Titan's belly. Like, are those digestive juices, or is that blood from all the humans the Titan's eaten? I don't know, but there are some things that occur to make me a little bit uncertain about where he is. Like, he's floating around in this red stuff, and there's a lot of other bodies around him that don't look digested or chewed up or chomped up all that much. And then I think it has to be a hallucination, but it's almost like he imagines his mother down there, and his mother was chomped 5 years ago. So I don't know where this place would be. Like, she couldn't still be in the Titan's stomach all this time. Plus, he was chomped by the beardy Titan. She was chomped by the grinning Titan. So is this some kind of nexus? Like, is being chomped by a Titan sort of a portal to some kind of nexus, and they all go to the same place and float in this fluid for some future use? I don't know. But it just made me question, like, is this literal? Is this metaphysical? Is this all just symbolic? I don't know, but at least I'm thinking about it, which I think's a plus for a show. It's a little bit of fun to think about stuff you're watching instead of just watching it sometimes. And besides that, this scene helps further establish that these events are happening concurrently. Because like I said in the beginning with Captain Levi's adventure, I didn't know where this set in the whole timeline. At one point, I thought this might have been all the way back 5 years ago, like around the time of episode 1. But Levi's off doing his thing while Aaron is floating around in the red fluid post-Chomp pre-resurrection. So it kind of helped me establish the timeline, and I did appreciate that. Also, I just have to say, like, my hat's off to the creators of this show, because I really do enjoy what I'm calling patchwork storytelling that they're doing. And when it's done well, it's just super satisfying and it's super enjoyable. When it's done poorly, it can cause a show to be almost unintelligible. But it's done really well here, so my hat's off to the creators, because that's ambitious. That's a risky way to tell a story. If you don't do it right, it could backfire. They did it right. And then, back with Aaron floating around in this red fluid, he's having this hallucination maybe of his mother. Maybe it's not quite a hallucination. I still don't have a grip on what was going on there. But he's overcome with despair, and just when I think he's going to give up, like when I think he is finally defeated, well, then he shows defiance in the belly of the beast. Somehow, it leads to Aaron discovering this ability. And this ability to become a Titan is still something I don't fully grasp, but we do have this awesome burst out scene. Like the way it's staged, the way it's framed, the way it's represented, the entire part of the execution of this burst out scene, like starting off with an arm just plunging out of the bearded Titan's mouth, and then the Titan kills over, and it's like instead of a chest burster from Alien, we have Aaron's pointy-eared Titan bursting out of his back and just destroying it. Looks over, the head is still intact, and he just starts stomping on that dead bearded Titan that chomped him. Stomp for a chomp. I think that's fair. Where I come from, you're lucky if a stomp's all you get for a chomp. But this was just so full of wonderful artistic choices, in my opinion. And we get to spend some time from Titan Aaron's perspective. And we get to see him going around, fighting, killing, sort of what he's feeling a little bit. We get to see that whole event from episode 7 and 8 through his eyes to a degree. And then we go on to some new stuff here. We see Aaron, he's sort of waking up. I mean, at the end of episode 8, we saw him sort of emerge from the Titan corpse after the big battle there. But now we see him kind of waking up and getting his footing. He's back in his human form, and he's clearly disoriented from the transition. As if there wasn't enough reason for the poor guy to sort of be confused and disoriented, he is surrounded by troops that are supposed to be on his side but are very clearly hostile. He's got cannons pointed at him. It all seems, at least to me, it seemed out of the blue and somewhat inexplicable. And it's also understandable that he's already prone to confusion, and having guns and cannons pointed in your face just doesn't help in that situation. And something that I didn't realize is just how many people saw what happened. There are a sizable number of others that kind of know that Aaron came out of that Titan and that whole event played out. I sort of thought it was only going to be his inner circle that knew about it, but while it's not exactly public knowledge, there's a big part of the public that has that knowledge. And I was kind of surprised at just how much distrust came from his fellow soldiers. I'm watching this heroic event, or these heroic events in episode 8, and then I was caught off guard by how much the soldiers were afraid of him and ready to just get rid of him right then and there. But when I thought about it a little bit more, it does make sense, because that probably is like an honest reflection of human nature and how all too often we fear what we don't understand. And we get to spend a moment or two with Jean. And when we see Jean, it's clear from his body language and that all of these events are weighing very heavily on him. And he did a very respectable job as an impromptu leader. And he's clearly developing as a leader, and he sort of turned over a new leaf there. But the aftershock of it has him a little bit wiped out here. And we learned that there was a confidentiality order put in place. So the first thing I'm asking when I see there's a confidentiality order is, who ordered this? Like, who is the person that wants to keep this confidential? I've got my thoughts as, episode 10 plays out, but then why? Why do they want to have this be a secret, which is a hard secret to keep, as many people seem to know about it at this point? Your first instinct would be, or at least their justification for this gag order, I'm sure would be to prevent panic among the populace. But that's just like an easy cop-out. I don't think that's their real motivation. I wonder if this is really somebody trying to cover something up. Is this part of a cover-up, this gag order? Well, I guess by definition, a confidentiality order is sort of a cover-up. And this cynical part of me leans way more towards a selfish or ego-driven or a nefarious cover-up, rather than just one of, until we understand it better, we don't want to talk about it type cover-up. So I think it's probably going to be something that I find distasteful, but I've been wrong more than once. We do see that the engineers have found a clever way to use the Titans themselves as a barrier against other Titans, which I think is cool. They have like this chain-style net, and it's got like these spikes or these barbs or something like that on it, and they're hooking Titans in place against the wall. And it's kind of gruesome and violent and vicious, but it also seems pretty effective. And I had to respect the ingenuity of this corps of engineers to come up with that. It has a very zombie-like feel to it, and I also think it's sort of implied that this defensive technique is the creation of Hannes. Hannes, who we met in episode 1, who at first was this person who was drinking too much and was portrayed as a coward. Now he's really found his place in the defense of humanity as an engineer. And also another cool thing that we see from Hannes is he expresses confidence that the 3 children he rescued are capable of survival. And is this just because he has some sort of affection to them, or he feels like a protector since he rescued them? He feels some sort of responsibility, and he's just saying this to make himself feel better? I mean, that certainly could be something that someone says. Or does he really think he could judge their strength and their resourcefulness at this really early age, when he rescued them 5 years ago? Or, and this is what I think maybe out of that sense of responsibility, perhaps he's been kind of quietly keeping tabs on them, like he's sort of from afar followed their development and their progress as cadets over the past 5 years, and that he's not just basing this on his impression of them when they were younger 5 years ago. And we get this older reserve officer. I think his name is Captain Vorman. I call him a reserve officer. I'm not entirely sure what his role is, but his name is Captain Vorman, and he's one of those supply officers during the battle who more or less abandoned his post. He was accused by younger folks of treason himself during what we saw in episode 7, and now here he is adamantly accusing Aaron of treason. And he's kind of like the ringleader. He is the commanding officer on the spot who is really seems to have his sights set on killing Aaron. And it leads us to this tense, prolonged standoff that really is the central story of these 2 episodes. It is what moves these 2 episodes along for the most part. But for me, this standoff was kind of a little reminiscent of some of the old Western cowboy movies I used to watch when I was a kid. Stuff like Rio Bravo or High Noon, where they have these tense standoffs where our heroes are woefully outnumbered, and how are they going to find their way out of this predicament? It just had that nice little Western standoff feel to it. But our 3 central protagonists, they have a cannon trained on them with an explosive round from what we see later on, and it almost seems like overkill, but then again, looking how it all plays out, it wasn't overkill because it wasn't effective, but it's also really, really indicative of just how much fear is the motivation for this Vorman character. W-O-E-R-M-A-N. Vorman, I think is how you pronounce it. And it's just such a wonderful illustration of this concept. He is afraid, but what is he afraid of? Is he afraid of someone else? Is he afraid of himself? It shows how an individual's fear, or perhaps their ego, or maybe a combination of both of those things, can lead to a decision that will weaken the body as a whole, like the governmental body, the military body, in order to just serve his own individual motivations. Particularly when somebody's placed in this mid-level of power, so you want to exercise the power you have and use the power you have, but also there's that possibility of moving up and being kind of gnarly that way. Or maybe it was just simple projection, with Vorman projecting his own cowardly, possibly treasonous actions during the battle onto these brave young people who made it clear just how weak and wrong he was. Maybe he wants to destroy them to save himself this constant reminder of how he failed and to kind of cover up his own cowardice. And Aaron is ordered to declare whether he's a human or a Titan. It's kind of heartbreaking here just how many people are really eager to kill Aaron. Why do they feel so threatened by his difference? I guess, Titans are the threat, so I can sort of relate to that, but because I'm seeing this in a large part from Aaron's perspective, breaks my heart to see them turning on him like that. They're absolutely willing to throw away what's potentially humanity's greatest weapon against these Titans in their fight for survival just because they don't understand it. Mikasa does stand up for Aaron with both of her blades drawn. Again, this is reinforcing what we've learned about Mikasa so far, her loyalty and her bravery. And I love it because there's this part where one of the soldiers that's familiar with Mikasa points out how she's basically equal to 100 normal soldiers or 100 regular soldiers, which is pretty impressive. I'm loving the way that Mikasa is such a fighting and killing machine. But also I've seen some of the regular soldiers' performance, and maybe it's not as impressive as it sounds because not all of them are great. But Eren is still clearly struggling with a little bit of memory loss from the whole thing. And I just can't help but have this outpouring of empathy for this young guy that's placed in such a dire situation, and he's not fully equipped to immediately comprehend what's going on around him. And, he doesn't even understand his own nature yet. Like, he doesn't quite know what happened, and he's being asked to explain it, and it's just unfair to the poor guy. And when he does declare that he is a human, well, his declaration is ignored, and they go ahead, and it makes it clear that the decision was made, and what he said, there was no answer that was going to satisfy Vermin, that the decision was made and Vormin was going to get rid of him. And, just when I'm watching this, the feeling that I'm getting is this whole standoff is way more about Vormin than it is about Eren. And here's where we get like a slightly informative flashback, because Eren thinks back to this key that he was given, the key that we saw earlier in the season, and he thinks about his father and this mysterious command to go find the basement. And this is that basement I speculated so much about in my last review video. Like, I feel a little validated by that now, but I'm still not certain what's in this basement. I'm also worried that it might take me into the final season to actually get there because, like I said, this show's playing a long game, so you got to be patient, but I trust the payoff will be worth it. But we do see Eren get this injection from his father, but the only explanation we get about that injection is that it's going to make him forget and that, quote, they will remember. So who are they? Like, is this basement filled with people? Or at least entities instead of serum? My earlier theory is it's full of serum to make everybody into these Titan Transformer people. And then I start to wonder if becoming whatever it is that Eren has become now, does that grant like a prolonged life because we've seen the healing, maybe some measure of limited immortality of sorts? And then I start to wonder if maybe this basement is filled with like the first generation Titan Riders. I don't know what else to call them. I'll call them Titan Riders for lack of a better term. And it also makes me start thinking about what a cool idea bioorganic mecha can be. I mean, isn't like a biological construct just a machine, but it's a machine built out of different materials? And then, for some reason, I had a random thought about the movies, the Pacific Rim movies, and I know that the mechas in the Pacific Rim movies are called Jaegers, and then suddenly, like, a eureka went off, and I wondered if they're called Jaegers as an intentional homage to Attack on Titan. That's something, I didn't know about Attack on Titan when I saw the Pacific Rim movies, and for some reason it didn't really click in until episode 9 of Attack on Titan season 1 that I'm doing for these videos. But the cannon fires, Eren bites his own hand, and a surge of energy emanates out from him. He transforms into something that shields himself and his friends from the attack of the cannon. But what he turns into is like an incomplete Titan. It's like a torso, a rib cage, a little bit of muscle, and no flesh. So I wonder, why was he only part of a Titan? And then I start to wonder, like, what are the limits to his power? A bit later, he will say something about he only summoned enough for protection, but that makes me wonder if he can summon less, then can he also summon more? Like, if he really wanted to, could he become as big as the Colossal Titan? I guess there's a whole lot of possibilities and a whole lot of questions to be answered by the narrative of the story. We get a glimpse in episode 10 of a soldier with some psychological damage, something I'll call battle fatigue. And we see this despondent guy is talking to Marco, and he seems suicidal, and Marco's trying to protect him. And then we even see like some of this psychological battle fatigue hits Potato Girl, which I wasn't expecting her to be affected like this. And I think it's wonderful when a show that features action can also feature the consequences and show the human damage, even among the survivors or people who wouldn't even have been considered casualties by the standards of the battle. This is a concept I don't think humans even really started to understand or to comprehend until sometime around that prolonged misery of World War I. And I also realize here for the first time that all of these survivors are still outside the wall. They're still in potentially dangerous territory because they're on the other side of the wall when that cannon blast goes off and they don't know what's going on in there. And I start to think about just how damaging that unexpected cannon fire can be to like these poor folks that are already shaken and distressed and damaged psychologically. A jerk move by Vermin because Vormin is a jerk. But Mikasa and Armin are processing what happened and how they survived, and they're temporarily protected by the fact that this massive smoke and dust cloud is obscuring them from the soldiers. They use this time to discuss their next steps, and Eren essentially puts his faith in Armin, which was awesome. And it's really touching to see the way that these three are shown to trust one another and just how strong their connection is and their bond is. And Eren, discloses to both the viewers and to his two friends about his basement mission. And he says at this point, I've got to go to that basement, like this flashback suppressed memory of what my father told me to do. And he tells his friends they don't have to go with him. They'll be safer if they just abandon him. But Mikasa immediately rejects that excusal. And she goes one step further and basically says she's going to follow him whether he wants her to or not. And again, this is the show being admirably consistent with the characterization of Mikasa. I was also happy to finally see a little expression of anger from Eren toward his father at this point. I think it'd be totally understandable for him to feel abandoned after regaining his memories of their last encounter. I mean, I've already declared my suspicion that Eren's father's not necessarily a good guy, but now I'm starting to second guess that too. But Armin goes out of the cloud to make his defense of Eren. And this is particularly touching given that Armin had just been plagued by feelings of worthlessness and self-doubt, and now his friend trusts him with all of their lives. He steps out of that cloud and he makes many great arguments about strategic value, and he makes this heroic stand where he even says he's willing to die to convince humanity to use Eren as their greatest asset. But the most interesting point of this argument to me is his argument's kind of about self-identification. I mean, he says, look, we saw him fight the Titans. We saw him protect the humans. If he considers himself one of us, then what more do you need? I thought that was a great argument. But of course, as I've already said, Vorman is a jerk. He already had his mind made up. It was a foregone conclusion. So he's getting ready to order the death of all three of them. But then, almost out of nowhere, Commander Pixis intervenes, stops Vorman from giving the order. And I guess at this point I need to apologize because previously, a couple of videos ago, I confused Pixis with Shadis, with the commandant from the training, like the drill sergeant type. I thought that Pixis and he were the same person. It's clear by now that they're different people, and many people corrected me on that. But I guess all bald people must look alike to me. That's probably why I always confuse One Punch Man with Captain Underpants. But I do offer a sincere apology to Attack on Titan fans, as well as bald people everywhere. But we do learn that the Titans always come from the south. I imagine that there will be a significance to this. And we also find out that Pixis is in charge of the most dangerous region of humanity, and also that he's probably just a little bit crazy, which I think is a fun combination. You gotta have a brilliant leader. He needs to be eccentric, and he's gonna make maybe a fun mentor for our heroes. I don't know how this relationship's gonna play out, but I like the idea of the brave, noble, but crazy military leader. And I get the idea that Pixis endorses this mission to the basement, so they're going to have a little bit of support from the military when they go on this mission to discover what I'm dying to find out what's in the basement. But first he asks Eren to prove himself by moving a boulder to block the hole in the wall, and Eren says he'll do it, and that's the end of the episode. So I don't know how I would feel if I was Eren about kind of having to prove myself. Also, I don't know what the limits are to how often can he go into his Titan form or how often can he call his Titan mecha. I just don't know if this is going to play out in a way we don't expect or if it's going to cause mass panic, but I'm eager to see it. So I'm going to go watch episode 11. That's all I've got. I keep trying to make them shorter, and for some reason they keep getting longer. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.